Good evening, everybody. My name is Bert Dicht. I am Vice President of Membership for the National Space Society. And on behalf of Larry Ahern, Vice President of Chapters, I'd like to welcome you to our NSS Town Hall this evening and our topic, the NSS Policy Committee. So as always, we'd like to thank you for joining us in our series of town halls and space forums. We've done probably over 40 of these events since we started back in March, April of 2020. And we're looking forward to a great rest of the year. And I'll be talking about our schedule coming up in just a second. As always, I'd like to go through the agenda and talk a little bit about our etiquette, some announcements, the upcoming space forums and town halls that we have. We'll go right into the program and then we'll close out the evening. So in terms of our virtual etiquette, if you would like to submit a question, I do encourage you to use the Q&A function. This works a little bit better because it goes right to the panelists and it's just the Q&A, Q&A and questions, and it's seen directly by them. It's easy to pick those out. You can use the chat function, but again, with the chat function, the questions can get mixed up with all the other comments that come in. I do encourage you, if you are using the chat function, be respectful of both the panelists and the audience. And it always is best to view the session in speaker mode. And actually, I think I want to make sure we're in that right now. I don't think we are. Whoops. I'll do that when I turn it over in a second. We'll be talking about that. We did get quite a few questions that were submitted beforehand, and we'll try to get as many of those answered before we turn it over and take questions live. I would like to remind you, if you support our cause and enjoy the programming like this, to make a donation to support NSS. It's very easy. Just go .nss.org/donate-now, and we can put that link into the chat function. And we certainly appreciate all the donations that have come in previously. It really helps us. Finally, in terms of the town hall itself, when we're done, you're going to be taken right to a survey. So please take a few minutes to complete the post-town hall survey once you exit the session. It is anonymous. The feedback has been excellent. It really helps us in terms of planning future events and also gives us an indication about who is joining us, how many times you've been part of this, and how you found out about the town hall. So let me just give you a brief schedule about what's coming up. In 2 weeks from tonight, we have a longtime NSS member, Marianne Dyson, who was a mission controller on the Space Shuttle program. She's just published a book called Space Shuttle Mission Control, and she's going to be sharing stories about shuttle mission control. So really looking forward to that. For October 7th, and this is tentative, we're going to have a talk on the India space program. Now, we might shift this to Saturday, October 9th. We'll let you know. This is to accommodate, obviously, the time change between the United States and India. So we want to make sure that the speaker is not talking in the middle of the night. So we'll be letting you know about that. We hope to firm that up within the next few weeks or so. On the 21st, we have NSS Director Bryce Meyer, who's actually writing a book about space farming. And if you're going to be going on deep space missions, being able to grow your own food is probably pretty important. So that should be a really interesting discussion. On the 4th of November, we have the prize winners of the NSS MMR's 2021 contest. And the topic was a food and nutrition plan for spaceflight to Mars. Kind of ties in with the space farming as well. And we'll probably take the rest of November off for the Thanksgiving holiday. And then looking at December 2nd, and this is just tentative, possibly close out with the space year in review. So a lot of great events coming up pretty soon. You can always check out them on space.nss.org/nss.spaceforums on our NSS website. So, and there's a link there also to all the recorded sessions that are on our YouTube channel. Before I go into introducing our panelists tonight, a couple of questions came in when they were submitted with the registrations about what our mission is and what our vision is. And that really does tie in directly to our topic tonight, because with the policy committee, it is about doing some of those things that help advance our mission. So if you look at our vision, people living and working in thriving communities beyond the earth, and to use the use of the vast resources of space for the betterment of humanity. And to get there, it's about promoting social, economic, technological, and political change in order to expand our civilization beyond Earth. Feel free to take a closer look at this. There's a lot more information on our website, and you're going to be hearing a little bit more about that tonight as we get into our panel session. First, what I'd like to do now, we have a very special guest to do a welcome for you. I would like to introduce our NSS President, Michelle Hanlon, to say a few words. And Michelle, I'm going to stop sharing so the screen is all yours.
Thanks. I got to send you a different picture, Bert. It's one of those sort of like, yeah.
Okay, we'll do that.
But thank you. Excuse me. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Bert and Fred and Larry, for creating this wonderful program. I think in many ways you were a lifeline to a lot of people during the pandemic, and as we continue through this, the dredges of it. I think I've always tell people in conferences, and I tell my students that the one plus side of this pandemic is that we are all much more comfortable seeing each other virtually, which gives us a lot more opportunity to exchange ideas with one another directly. So the policy committee, obviously this is near and dear to my heart. I'm a lawyer, so policy is pretty much my middle name. I'm delighted that my former student Charles is now the vice chair of the committee. The fact of the matter is that technology is actually probably moving faster than the law and the regulations that we need right now. And so we really need an organization like the NSS to push those regulations that we need to support the technology, to support all of these plans that we need to have in place to have a successful and sustainable human communities in space. So we're talking everything from, what is an astronaut? Where does the sky end and space begin? We need to, and we advocate for things. We are advocating for space solar power, for commercial LEO, for commercial lunar and orbit and cislunar economy. So the policy committee is really sort of the heart of this engine of moving us forward where we need to be at a national level and at an international level. So it's a privilege for me to be a member of the policy committee. We do meet every Tuesday. I encourage you to pepper Randy and Chaz with questions, challenge them with questions, challenge them with ideas, and understand and know that we are always available to you. You can reach out to any one of us at any time with an idea that you think it would be interesting for NSS to explore. So with that, I am going to shut up. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to a great evening. Thanks again, Bert.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Let me get back to sharing my screen. And now I'm going to introduce our panel for tonight. Let me see if I can get this to advance here. There we go. So it's my pleasure to introduce the chair of the NSS Policy Committee, Randy Gigante. Randy's is a longtime NSS member, long career in the aerospace industry, and again now serves as the chair. And I'd also like to introduce Charles Ellzey, who is the vice chair. And as Michelle had said, Charles is one of our NSS legal fellows who's an attorney who specializes in space law. So we've got some really great expertise here. What I'm going to do now is first turn this over to Charles for some comments and remarks. So Charles, it's all yours.
Hey, thanks, Bert. And thank you all for being here tonight. I really appreciate the opportunity. As y'all know, this is kind of my first year as the vice chair, and I am really enjoying it. It's a great way for me to stay involved, and happy to be here. So thanks for coming. And I do apologize about the little bit of noise that there may be in the background. I'm doing a bit of unexpected travel today, so sorry for that in advance. So the first thing I want to talk about is something we did recently with a group called Foundation for the Future. And, you know, the way I'm going to start here is just kind of talk a little bit about what we do. So this group came to us with a bill called the Space Corporation Act, something they were putting forward in Congress. More or less, the goal of the bill was to kind of remove space development funding from the cyclical nature of American politics. Unfortunately, we know every 4 or 8 years, it seems like someone else comes in, and a lot of times things change. And unfortunately, in the investment world, that leads to not a whole lot of investment, sadly, sometimes. And so this group kind of wanted to address that by coming in and starting a public-private partnership. The bill had a lot of good potential, but there were some serious issues that we were able to identify with the policy committee. Some things like liability provisions as far as, you know, international law holds the US government responsible, but there was a little bit of uncertainty as far as, you know, it had provisions where the US government could use those assets in a national emergency, but it was unclear who would be liable if those assets damaged, for example, the satellite or object of another country. And so after, you know, more or less what we did was we took the bill, we took it to the policy committee. We had our folks on the committee do a review more or less of what they thought of the bill. Then we came up with a response, which I helped author with the help of the policy committee. And we more or less came to a consensus of 10 points, things that we felt needed improvement with the Space Corp Act. And it was very successful because we actually had Foundation for the Future implement, I believe it was 4 or 5 of those, and then they left a couple up to Congress as well, but they agreed that they were things that needed to be done. So that was a great way for us to not only get exposure to another space group, but also Congress as well. And then so moving on to just, you know, another thing that we kind of do, I'm currently in the process of working with a engineering student from Texas A&M for the Lunar Far Side Telescope. And so it's a very cool process because, you know, I myself as a lawyer, I don't know much about the engineering side, so I'm able to work with an engineering student who knows the technical side, but I'm able to bring in the editing side. And so that is another thing that we do a lot of is we help folks edit these pieces into position papers. We take a lot of technical or mechanical jargon and turn it into a piece that we can then, you know, bring to Congress or bring before staffers or something like that, you know, they're not just going to toss away immediately and go, oh, geez, all this kind of crazy technical speak. They're going to actually sit down and say, oh, this is actually kind of interesting. And we can kind of hook them and get them into our cause. So that's been a very fun experience as well. And that's really, you know, that's one of the biggest things that we need, you know, from you guys is that just participation. So in doing articles like that or in doing feedback on those kind of, you know, legislative recommendations, that's what we need is we need folks to help us with those recommendations. We need folks to give input as far as what was that response we needed to send to Foundation for the Future? What are things that you feel this bill needs? And, you know, just that kind of stuff. And then on the other side with position papers, not just finding topics or finding engineering students who want to bring something out to light, but also helping us edit those pieces, helping us see, you know, what exactly is the issue that you feel is catching the eye of everyone these days, and how exactly do we formulate that issue into those papers. And so the last thing I was going to talk about was we're gearing up to do some work on ITAR. I know a lot of our, you know, congressional stuff, reform, lobbying, and that type of thing. A lot of it is to try and make space better. And in that sense, I mean, to try and make investment, development, and all those things better. And, you know, I see that, Leanne, I just saw you comment there. It's glad to have you. I didn't know you were on the call, so I apologize. I would have given you a shout out. But yeah, so the last thing that we're doing is we're working on getting an ITAR piece together. And so one of the greatest ways that we could have feedback from you guys would be, honestly, if you know any industry professionals, if you know folks that work with ITAR on a daily basis, and you know how it affects their business. That's one of the new things that we really want to touch on is go to Congress and say, look, these regulations over and over have been limiting. They have forced US companies to struggle in the international markets. A lot of times people have gone, you know, designed around ITAR or this or that. How can we make these regulations better? How can we make these regulations in a way where they foster space development, they still protect American interest, but they don't prevent folks from, you know, investing in space development, which is, you know, a lot of these things, they're not going to get there without heavy investment because, you know, that's unfortunately, space is expensive. And yeah, so those are really all the comments I had. And thank you for your time.
Charles, could you just let some people know what ITAR means? Some might not know. Okay.
Of course, my apologies. Yes, International Traffic in Arms Regulations. It's the set of federal regulations that basically controls what the U.S. government deems a weapon, which unfortunately is everything from fire suppression systems to radio waves. And so a lot of times that's very limiting in satellite manufacturing and other businesses because there's just simply no way to get around those regulations, and they're very burdensome. They often require years and years of record keeping and things like that. And it can be a real drag on business.
Very good. Thank you so much. And now what I want to do is to turn it over to Randy. Randy?
Thanks, Bert. So Charles, give you some perspective of some of the newest areas we're getting into in terms of the NSS Policy Committee. So just to step back more at a higher level, wanted to try to talk more about, again, what is it the Policy Committee is doing? First of all, the membership. Besides myself, Chaz and Michelle are also members of the committee. And we have recently had some changes here that Al and Zildulas moved on and other roles, and particularly on the international side. But also Jeremy Wainscott has also has a limited time, so I have volunteered to step up to, at least for a time, to fill his shoes and try to figure out how to keep things moving with the NSS policy. And the two areas that we focus on in terms of our activities, at least until recently, has been Fall Fury and March Storm, which are basically participating along with many other organizations in lobbying Congress for specific policy points that we agree to every year. And secondly is approve policy papers and post them up on the NSS website. Now, those two activities are relatively separate and not always completely synchronized. And that's what I'm trying to do, is trying to figure out how we can do that more effectively, as well as get a lot of input from the rest of NSS activists and members in terms of exactly how we can do this better, how we can really recognize fulfill the vision of millions of people living and working in space and using the resources of space as soon as possible. That's really what we're about, and everything else is secondary. So the two areas recently we've been successful as an example have been, one is the Planetary Defense. That's something where NSS was at the forefront firsthand in Congress. I saw it firsthand, where we actually put the right question in the right person's ear at the right time to start the process that now has made planetary defense, and particularly surveying all the near-Earth asteroids as soon as possible as official NASA policy. And that was what I believe would not have happened without NSS really being involved and being able to take advantage of an opportunity and then build on that opportunity over the past few years to such a point where now it's accepted policy, and we can just watch it come to fruition. The other one that's, again, I think it creates a lot of controversy, is how exactly are we going to move on from the space station? I mean, we lobbied hard for the space station for decades, and now the question was what was the next steps, and what's the gap after the space station has reached its end of its useful life? And that's an area where a lot of people just refused to talk about it. And we were willing to say the emperor has no clothes and to spell out specifically what needed to be done. And now with the current administration, it's pretty much standard policy that there is a transition plan. It may not be a fully conservative one or effective one, but it's one that actually exists now, when people can talk about the end of the ISS and the fact that there will be an end, and that there should be multiple commercial platforms ongoing by the time the ISS does end, whatever that year may be. So those are two areas that we've been very successful, but we don't want to really rest on our laurels. So one of the key areas going forward, and I'm getting a lot of questions about both at individual NSS member levels as well as other organizations, saying, well, what is NSS's policy on Artemis, and more specifically on going back to the moon, or more generally going back to the moon. And that's where I keep referring people to our current paper. And I think I put an example of that in the chat there. I'm not sure if you'll see that, but it's also available on our website under position paper. So that's where I'd like to start today, and to roll in some of the questions that you've had about it in terms of what is it? How can I get involved in the NSS Policy Committee, and what kind of expertise are you looking for? So that paper is called where is it? Find it here. The Artemis Moon Program was last updated in May of 2020, and has a lot of ideas in it, and I'm looking for some feedback as to how we can update this paper, because I'm personally going to update this. I'm not a lawyer by training. I'm certainly not expert in writing position papers, but I think this is the area that's most that I can most contribute to, and I need a lot of input from, in terms of how we can, as NSS, express our viewpoints about the Artemis Moon Program, and more broadly, how we should be going to the moon. But it has to be updated, because a lot of things that we've been asking for have already come to fruition. We've got the human lander as a commercial contract, not as a government-owned vehicle. That's one of the points. We do have a very strong CLIPS program, which is the Commercial Lunar Payload Services, with multiple independent commercial companies putting payloads on the moon over the next couple of years. But again, that's not updated, because we thought we were going to get landings by 2021, but now it looks like 2022. And then the last point is a fine point. Is we talked about tipping point grants, that we endorse, that NSS also endorses tipping point grants. That's like a minor point, but it is very important. But again, I'm looking for some bigger ideas from NSS members in general, and activists in particular, about what we should be advocating, rather than just getting into the minutia of we want NSS, we want NASA to support more agreements to study methods for ship-to-ship fuel transfer. Well, that's a very, very specific point. I'm looking for us to try to find ways to advocate things, either through upcoming fall fury, or in coming in March, for March storm, exactly what we should be going at. It's a little more aggressive, a little more broad than that. And we have some ideas, but again, I'm looking for ideas from participants here, as well as from activists individually. So that's part of what I wanted to discuss today. But I'll stop it right there, and suggest, Bert, you think we should have? Do we have any questions yet from or should I try to look at some of the questions I already have from the town hall?
Why don't we take a few questions that were submitted early on, and then we can, because I don't see any yet that have been submitted from our audience. So we can, because since we have quite a few, we can do that. That sounds okay to you, Randy?
Sure.
So I'll start with the first question. How does the NSS Policy Committee make a determination on which policy either to support or endorse?
Okay. So basically we operate different. This is where I can discuss how the committee operates. We operate differently from most of the other NSS committees. We don't have a regular meetings of the whole committee. Most of our work gets done via a Google group, and it's amazing to me, having watched it for the past few years, how much has been done just using that Google group. It's about 25 people, so it's more than just what you would call the voting members of the committee, which it's voting members is I think in the next iteration is going to be about 8, 9, or 10 people. But this Google group that with participants and contributors is up to 25 people, and so many of them are people that Michelle has brought in through her legal fellows. But we are looking for more as well. I've just talked to one person recently and suggested they should be involved in this. And basically, it's an open Google group where we discuss the next papers, and that's where the real determination, I think, is made. But the ultimate decision is with ultimately with myself as the chair, and I rely heavily on getting feedback from NSS leadership, many of whom are also on the policy committee itself, whether it be Michelle or Dale or Chaz or Al Globus, I think who's also on this call today. That's really the general way of doing it. This is not a voting thing. It's more of a getting a consensus and discussion and feedback from people that are experts. If we're talking about space solar power, we want to get the experts like John Mankins. If we're talking about lunar activities, we want to get expert like Dave Chevront, who are both on the policy committee to give us their feedback. So that is the general discussion. But again, the buck stops with me, and we decide at some point you have to. With short turnaround times, you have to make a decision do we support or not support something that's just come up in the news, or again, we don't have to take a position on everything. So we have to be selective in which positions we take and which battles we fight, where we can make a difference. That's the answer to that one, I think.
Right. Does that go to a higher level at NSS? Does the board get involved at all, or is it strictly is that I'll call it, is that power entrusted to the policy committee to make those decisions? Yeah,
as I've been trained, at least, it's entrusted to the policy committee, and particularly to the chair of the policy committee to make the decision. Again, if we get a call, for example, from a reporter about what's NSS's policy on this, well, whatever answer that the chair gives that's the NSS policy. So it's kind of an intimidating situation, but you have to be able to make that decision and again, speak carefully so that we don't get stuck with a policy that we would rather have not have made. But that's really how we set the policy is to try to get the feedback from the core leadership, like I said, Michelle and others, before we have to make a major decision. So it goes through many iterations on this Google group that we make this. We go through iterations of both individual ideas as well as individual changes to words on position papers before it's published.
Obviously, in an organization like NSS or any kind of association, positions are taken that maybe members sometimes don't agree with. So what happens if a member doesn't agree with an NSS position? Are they able to provide at least some input and have their voice heard?
Yeah, there's multiple ways to do that. What I found is the most interesting and I would call it egalitarian place to provide that input, and it's even broader than NSS, is via our Friday calls. We have a Friday call for everyone that's interested in space policy. It's almost just like a happy hour of space politic nerds who just love to talk about space policy all the time. But it goes into many different places, and to me it's also where we discuss how we're going to implement March Storm and Fall Fury. But to me, I found we have leaders from all the different organizations who dial in, and I found it a pretty good freewheeling forum that's not a Zoom format, but still just voice format to be able to really engage and interact with people that you never would otherwise. And to me, that's been the most I guess democratic part of the process is to have that place to interact on a regular basis as part of the Alliance for Space Development calls on Fridays.
So is that open to any member that might want to participate?
Yep, open to any member. Yes. Again, the main thing we always talk about in both the Google group itself for writing and in this call for voice is not for attribution. Is if you're on this call, anything that's said is not to be attributed to whoever says it, and certainly we don't want to specifically fold this out to the general public to say this is what they're talking about in NSS. It's internal to that forum.
Oh, very good. I was telling before we started the session tonight, I was telling Randy how I got involved as a volunteer with NSS, and I've been a longtime member. And a few years ago, I responded to a call for volunteers, and ended up having a great discussion with our VP of Education, Lynn Zielinski. And she asked me what committee I wanted to be part of. And of course, I said the policy committee, because that sounded like the most fun and the most interesting and where you could really have an impact. And at the time, she told me, well, there aren't any openings on the policy committee. She was going to pass my name forward. And would I be interested in the membership committee? And of course, the rest is, as they say, history. But I was able to participate as a non-voting member and sit in on some meetings. And I was truly impressed with the depth of knowledge that the members have. Are there, for those that might be interested in eventually serving on the policy committee, what kind of qualifications are you looking for? Because again, the knowledge base that they had was incredibly impressive. I thought I was knowledgeable, but I didn't even compare to some of the knowledge that those individuals have.
Yeah, it's a good question. And so right now, again, we have a pretty diverse committee, but what I'm trying to do is to open it up more to people. I think we've already done that through Michelle's legal students that Chad's being one of them, but also I think in general we're willing to open up to almost all of the NSS legal scholars that Michelle is mentoring. And one way we can do that is again through expanding this group of people that are regularly discussing the space policies specifically for NSS. We also want to do more than that, and that's again why I'm here to figure out how best we can get people involved. And again, the simplest way in the past has always been just come to March Storm and get involved in that. But since COVID, it's been much more difficult, obviously, to have the free interaction because you can't do it in person. So what I'm looking for is to get more people, not just people that are expert in law, but people that are interested in space policy from other aspects, whether it be commercial or scientific. And we need more of those people to be involved in the policy committee, and more specifically to be involved in writing and editing papers. So I think the easiest way to say how can I participate is volunteer to write a paper about a space policy you're enthusiastic about. And if you're not big on writing from scratch, then volunteer to help edit a paper that someone else is writing. Is the fastest way to get involved without having to be, quote, a member of a committee. Because again, like I said, I'm trying to keep the membership as close as possible to people that are voting that are experts in certain fields or leaders of NSS, so that we are very closely tied between NSS leadership and the policies, where it's not just me making a call whether this is NSS policy or not. We've already got the NSS leaders around me saying, yeah, that's a good idea. But that's again what I'm saying is a lot of opportunity for individuals to get involved if you have something to contribute, whether it be writing or editing. Or the next step, of course, will be willing to do specific things in terms of politics, contacting congressmen. The one thing I would mention there is we have a couple key people in states like New Jersey and Florida, where we have someone that basically manages meeting with these offices in Congress virtually for the past year, but previously more in person, to develop a relationship. And that's what we really lack as NSS. We meet with these staffers, and there's a turnover there, but we have every 2 years we have to start over again, because either there's a different congressperson or there's a different staffer, and we need someone that's going to be the focal point year over year. And that's where a third place where you can contribute. If you're able to help us in a given state, it doesn't have to be the whole state, it could be just one office. It certainly helps to be an office that is really important to one of the space committees. But there are lots of ways to be involved. But again, because of the because we're all volunteers and the limited resources, we need some people that are really being self-starters and able to do this and just take limited direction. And I'm willing to provide that, and in terms of getting to the next level of being an activist on space policy.
great. I saw that Charles put his email in the chat for those that might want to be get more involved in the policy committee. So please feel free to reach out to him. But I also saw a message that people are having trouble copying and pasting. So I'm going to see what we can do about that. But let me step over to Michelle. Michelle has had her hand up for a while.
Go ahead.
So Michelle, it's all yours.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to sort of support what Randy was saying. First, I want to say, I think one of the most fulfilling things is actually to go and advocate on behalf of NSS to your congressperson, because especially staffers are just lapping up information. And so honestly, if you have the time, we can brief you on the positions, we can give you the materials you need, and they will open their doors to you, because you know what, they have to, especially if you're in that district, they are going to open your door to you, and you are going to have a direct line to your representative on these really, really important issues. So I think that's really fulfilling and something that you can feel immediately like you're contributing. You all have contributed by becoming members. But the other thing I wanted to say is I have about now 35 students on what we call our President's Advisory Council, and we are working on 15 different topics. And what we would love to do is have mentors from people in industry, from people in policy, from any of you on any of these topics. And so what I can do is put in the chat sort of the topics we're looking at. And if you are willing to be a mentor, then you don't have to write. You can just spend an hour on the phone with a group of 4 or 5 students and share your expertise and experience with them, and they'll go ahead and take that and write it. And so that's another way. I think that's a great way to sort of bring members together as well. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Why don't we take a couple of the questions, Randy and Charles, that came in from our audience. And one has come in from Al to just make some comments about where we are with space solar power.
Sounds good. Thanks, Al, for reminding me. Yeah. So one area where we've been focused is on the Artemis program, and I mentioned a few of those things, but I failed to mention what's really been the up and coming area of interest is space solar power, and that's where we've only recently took a position after years of contemplating it that we want to support space solar power directly in our talking to our Congress people. And we haven't gotten any specific money allocated, but what we've found is that by talking to Congress people, we are definitely building the knowledge base throughout the space community that space solar power is a viable option now. When we just started to talk to a lot of these Congress people, they don't understand what space solar power is and even how it would work. And we've gotten through a lot of the basic questions now with the Chinese advocating it, and with even the recent paper by the Progressive Policy Institute suggesting that it is an important, and basically they took John Manchin's ideas and papers and they codified them and put them into a democratic policy that now is something we can refer to when we talk to Congress people. Look, this is what your guys think. Why don't you consider supporting some more money for some projects for space solar power in the next NASA budget or the next DoD budget. So that's an area where, again, we've gotten out of the noise threshold for and gotten people's attention. What we haven't gotten now is a real program like we have with Planetary Defense and like we have with the actual replacement of the ISS with commercial space stations. So thanks for that question, Al.
I think Al raised his hand, so we'd like to do a follow-up. So I think I will let him talk right now.
Okay, cool.
So, okay, Al, you should be able to speak right now.
Can you do that?
Let's see, let me try doing it again.
Oh, you got it. He's up.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Thanks,
we can hear you, Al.
Okay.
Yes.
Just a couple of little things. ASD meeting is on Friday.
Yeah, the ASD.
It's on Monday. It's on Monday. Sorry.
No, it's on Friday for this was an earlier meeting than our Monday meeting out. This is the one that anybody that's interested in ASD shows up for.
Okay. Sorry about that. And there have been NSS position papers on space solar power going back a long, long way. I've written a couple of them actually.
Right.
So NSS is, I mean, so space solar power is a big part of O'Neill's vision. It was Mark Hopkins actually supposedly talked him into endorsing it as a way to pay for space settlements. So it goes all the way back to the 70s. And the thing that's really interesting now is that the price has always been an issue. Space solar power has been very, very expensive. But there have been two major things that have happened recently that turn that around. The first is the SpaceX Starship, which is believed to be able to carry payloads up to low Earth orbit at about 1/10 to 100th the cost of the shuttle era, or 1/10 the cost of the current era with Falcon Heavy. And the other thing is that in a space flight, the launch is not the most expensive part of a space flight. The most expensive part is the payload. And that's because the payloads are put together one at a time by hand in special purpose stuff and tested individually. If you could come up with a way where you can make your space solar power satellite out of thousands and thousands of essentially identical parts, then you could get economies of scale on building them. And that is exactly what is happening. This is when we're referring to Menken's work. He's done a lot of things over many, many years, but in my view, most noted and important one that he's done recently is this notion that you can get economies of scale while building one single space solar power satellite, because there's maybe got about 16 component module types, and each of them you produce thousands and thousands and thousands of them, and that's what gives you economies of scale, and that's what may finally give us the economic situation where space solar power is cheap enough to take off. And once it's cheap enough to sell and make even a little bit of money, it's off to the races. It'll be a great race to ride too.
Very good. Thanks so much for that added perspective, Al. Okay, let me get to a couple more questions that have come in. Question from Seth. To what degree do you dive into the details of advocating a policy or a particular mission design? For example, most NSS members would agree on supporting a human return to the moon ASAP, but there are people I respect on both sides of the issue of whether or not to build the lunar gateway.
Okay, that comes to a couple issues there. It's again, starting out with do we advocate specifics? I guess the main thing we shy away from as one of our principles for the policy committees, we don't want to support a specific company. All right, so that is the easiest one. Now, when you're talking about maybe there's that company is the only one that's doing a certain technology and we support the technology, say like Starship today with SpaceX, it's hard to get around that one. But I think we've come to the point where Starship is far enough along that our discussion now is about, okay, let's assume that Starship or something like it, if the Chinese copy it or something, is available. What would we do differently? And that's the kind of ideas I'm looking for NSS members and activists to think about is, don't worry about, is it going to happen? Assume it's already happened, because it's going to happen quickly. And we're not probably individually or even as an organization going to influence how quickly Elon Musk finishes the job. He's going to do it. We're going to watch. So when he's done, what do we want to be? What do we want to have in the wings, waiting to take advantage of that new paradigm that Starship is? But then again, that doesn't mean we want to be around and saying, we love Starship. Starship is the greatest. That's not what we want to do. And the same thing, whether we love Gateway. Gateway is, to me, Gateway is personally, Gateway is a very interesting and important piece of the cislunar puzzle. But we've in previous years got many different arguments about what's the point of doing it. The point is that the contracts have already been let. It's fixed price. There's going to be a gateway. The question is not what should we have a gateway or not. Let's assume the gateway. Let's assume the gateway is there. Let's assume Starship is there. what are we going to push for next? What are we going to do that's not going to, that if we just disappeared at NSS and we didn't do anything else, wouldn't happen. That is the hard part, trying to find something where we have the resources to make the difference, like we did with Planetary Defense. But we also, it's something that's really going to change our to help us get closer to our vision of millions of people living and working in space. So I hope that goes at least partly to answering your question, Seth.
It really seems like we have to walk a very fine line. And as an organization, as you said, we don't want to take positions of supporting or not supporting a specific company. But at the same time, we want to be able to be I guess, a respected voice, and I don't know whether we use the term neutral, but it is a difficult task to manage all that, because there are so many different space policies that we could take positions on. Right.
So that, again, that's why we have to always keep that in mind. I think this other members of the policy committee are good to keep. And when I get too focused on the details as being an engineer, they bring me back to, let's keep focused on the vision and not worry too much about the specifics about that particular technology. And I think that's definitely something that helps keep our policy in line with our vision.
Very good. Let me take another question that came in from the audience. This is from Jeffrey. How detailed are the records MSS keeps over multiple years of who contacted which politicians and what the politicians said about particular issues?
I'd say we have a much better system in the past couple of years. It's probably where we're weak in terms of not just NSS, but ASD as a whole, 5 or so years ago. I think given the technologies we're using now, we have a better handle. But again, the problem here goes back to there's a very short attention span in the political world. That we talk about the timeframes that we're interested in, and the staffers' eyes glaze over very quickly. So you really, and particularly you're probably talking to that staffer this year, and next year you're talking to a new staffer, or you're talking to a new congressman. So that's where we need to have that relationships for key congressmen, knowing that every year we're going to lose a few of those relationships. And so that's our catch-22, is we don't have enough people developing those relationships. And we don't need them with 365 congressmen. We do need them with specific ones in specific states. And I think we do have them more indirectly than directly. And we certainly have proven we've been able to get bills passed, and Michelle has done that with her For All Mankind efforts. And I think we've come close in a couple other areas. But we have more. I guess my short answer is we have more tools, but we need more people to help use those tools more effectively.
Sounds great. Since you touched on a bit about contacting members of Congress, can you explain a little bit more about March Storm, what it is, and how people might get involved?
Sure. So March Storm is again, copied of a number of organizations do this, where we get about 20 to 50 people would go down to DC, and then we would meet the day before and get training on what the position papers are, or positions are that year. And typically we pick 3 or 4 positions that we believe are actionable and specific and enough that will get the congressman's attention on. And then we send people out in teams of 2s and 3s to talk to each of the offices that we believe are important. Typically, we pick key offices like appropriations or in the science committee, people that are actually interested in space already, or at least have the ability to influence the budgets for space. And again, that's been in the past. With COVID for the past couple of years, we've learned to develop new techniques, and I think in some ways it's better, in some ways it's worse. For example, we'll have 3 or 4 people get on a call and we'll talk to the staffer, but we seldom see the staffer's face. So we get very little reaction from them. We just hear their voice. They can see our face, which is, I guess, better than nothing. But on the positive side, it's much easier to follow up with them. It's easier to get get them to talk to us and meet with us, because they don't have quite as many meetings because there's nobody in their office, or they're not in the office themselves. So we're learning to adapt to this new world, and I don't think it's going to go away. So we're going to have some of the advantages of the new world, but we also want to get back to the face-to-face meetings. But again, it comes down to, if we don't develop the relationships, the meeting is going to be of little lasting benefit. And if we don't have a lasting benefit, then we're not really achieving our objective of realizing NSS's vision.
Very good. Thanks, Randy. Let me get into a couple other questions that came in from those who registered. And this one is an interesting one I've heard before, but you know, let me find it here. Do NSS's principles include a preference for a form of government to be established from the very beginning in any and all space settlements? That's a whopper.
That's a loaded question. Yeah. I guess I would try to, again, look at it from a high level and try to keep it as neutral as possible, saying is that our vision is to get people out there, and again, I'm a big science fiction geek too. I don't believe we're going to be able to tell the people once they get there what their form of government is going to be, any more than the Brits could tell Americans what their form of government was going to be 100 years or 200 years after it was settled. So it's fun to talk about democracy, and it's great for debates and things like that. But I don't think that in terms of the resources we have available, that it's that important for us to dwell on those kind of principles. I mean, the best I would say that I would say we would align with the fact that we're focusing on democracy is that most of the activities of policy committee is focused primarily on the U.S., on what the U.S. can do, not because we don't think the rest of the world matters, just because we only have so much resources, and we have an international committee. Michelle can talk more about that in terms of we like to stay within certain boundaries, and so influencing U.S. based policy to me is big enough. And if the U.S. is doing it, at least we know that first order that we're dealing with a country that supports democracy.
Right. Let me just address something that I've seen in the chat again, that people are having trouble copying and pasting some of the links. I can assure you there is no setting that we put in there to prevent people from copying and pasting. So I don't know what the issue is, but a suggestion I have, two things. We will certainly, when we send out the recording to everybody, probably try to get a list of all the links that were in here and include them in the email. But you might also just want to do a quick screenshot of that area of the chat with some of those links. So just a suggestion, but I we've done many of these and I've never heard of that problem that's come up at this point, but I see a lot of links being posted and emails being posted so people can talk to each other. So I do apologize for the problem, but I'll look into it. But again, we did not put any kind of setting in that would prevent people from copying and pasting in the chat. So, but we'll look into that. Let's see, we're approaching the 10 o'clock hour on the East Coast. I've got a couple more questions that have come in, Randy. And this one again from Seth. To what extent may NSS chapters and individual members feel free to advocate for space policy on behalf of NSS to state and local governments on their own, as long as they don't contradict NSS policy papers? For example, in a state like California, advocating on a state level could be an opportunity to influence national and global space activities. That's a really good question.
I think I've talked more with the Arizona chapters about advocating with the state governments, and I'm definitely all for it. Again, that if in most cases, I would say that we want to stick with what NSS policies are. And again, individuals can always advocate whatever they want, and I would assume chapters, whether they be completely completely part of NSS, or if they're separately incorporated, I assume that that's where more my expertise is a little less clear. But I would think that they would be, be able to lobby for whatever they think is valid. But if they're representing NSS, I think they would have to stick with whatever is NSS policy. And what I'm going to try to do is make it easier via the website and other communications tools, so people can figure out what NSS policy is. Because again, if you go to the policy position papers, there's just a long list of them. So it's not as easy to say, okay, what is NSS policy on this? Well, it's hard just to say that in a nutshell just by looking at the website. But I will try to make it easier for individuals and chapters to know what NSS policy is while I'm serving here.
That sounds good. I guess more of a broad, open-ended question here. What are some of the major policy issues coming up that might require an NSS position?
Sorry, man, repeat that again.
What are some of the major policy issues coming up that might require an NSS position?
Okay, so we've talked about space solar power, which we obviously have a position on. We've talked about the lunar activities. Let's see, the one that Leanne earlier talked about that she's working on was the Lunar Farside Telescope. So one of the concerns is how much do we get involved with solving the problem that eventually, if we put a lot of people and a lot of things into Earth orbit, you're not going to be able to use a telescope from the surface of the Earth. That's just reality. Just like you can't really use a telescope in the middle of a big city right now. If you're going to have a lot of people, you're going to have a lot of energy, you're going to have a lot of light, you're going to have to go someplace else that's much darker to observe the heavens. And we believe that should be the far side of the moon. And that's not official NSS policies. I don't want to speak out of turn, but that certainly is something that we are working to develop here, again, to make it clear that there is no turning back, that we really are going out there, and we can't keep space pristine, but we can still do many things that we want to do in space, including astronomy.
Very good. A few other questions that came in with people registered, and should the congressional ban prohibiting NASA's collaboration with the China National Space Administration in space projects be ended?
I would say that NSS doesn't have a position on that right now, and I would probably stay there. I'm not as say we should end it or should not end it, but I think that's way outside of what we're going to be able to influence.
Right. Do you have a list of key members of Congress or senators that are key to space policy and the advancement of space settlement? Because people were wondering if they could reach out, contact them, if there was a kind of a list of who the proponents are.
Right. There's not a specific list. I mean, we have the most success recently is with Arizona Senator Kirsten Sinema, and I think we've had as part of that is with it's in her self-interest, given that there's a lot of work at the universities in Arizona that's going towards projects that she's now supporting. But I think also that she has really impressed me as a politician that goes outside of her swim lane to advocate things that she doesn't have to advocate. That she goes above and beyond, and she certainly was the person that asked the first question of that started the process to get us to having a planetary defense program in NASA that we didn't have 3 years ago. And so to me, that she's on the short list. As we used to have people like Dana Rohrabacher, who's no longer in Congress, or before that George Brown.
Brown, yes, I remember.
Yes, George Brown. So we have definitely had some key leaders there. What we are still lacking again is those key staffers that we have to develop relationship with. In the past, having one key staffer has made a big difference for us, and I mean, Chaz obviously has worked in that environment, tell you how it works there. I'm not sure he's still on, but
he unfortunately had to get ready
yeah,
for
but it's really important to develop those relationships, and it's really hard to maintain them. So again, that's what we really need, is to be able to develop relationships with these staffers that will get us at least, I think, as Michelle did, in order to get her For All Mankind bill through, was quite successful. But again, those things are dynamic. What worked last time, there's a whole different group in 2 years from now. And that's really the challenge. And it's fun, but it can be taxing to you when you have to talk to somebody again about the same subject you talked to them last year, and start the education process all over again, because their congressman is really important.
No. I saw a question in the chat about the other senator from Arizona, Mark Kelly. Has he taken any positions? Obviously, he's a former astronaut.
Right. And we actually do have a relationship with a former staffer of Senator Sinema's, who's now working for Mark Kelly. And so we have developed that relationship. That's the good news. The bad news is, because he's up for election in 2 years, and his focus is, and he has tried to distance himself from space, but more importantly, he's trying to focus on local issues like water rights, things that matter in the state of Arizona. Having been there a few times, I realize how important water is, and making sure that that's really where his resources are focused. So we haven't found a hook yet that will get him interested in a space bill. And he has declined to be on the committees that were most relevant for space. So he's definitely, his actions as well as his actual staffer's words suggest that Mark Kelly is maybe much a longer term play, should he get reelected in 2 years. And that we would have to wait until then, probably, to really have a good relationship with him in terms of an impact with our vision.
Let me get a couple more questions that came in from the audience while we still have some time. A question from Joseph: does NSS have a policy on orbital debris?
On orbital debris, we do have several position papers out on that. I would say that orbital debris is something that we really think it needs to be addressed. My personal position has been, again, not NSS policy, is I've been advocating that it's not one of the things we were pushing for with Congress. I've just, for example, just listened to another one of the many conferences that are on orbital debris, and what seems to be the general feeling is that there's until someone is willing to pay for the old spent rockets up there to decommission them, that we're not going to get closure on the problem for orbital debris. That's my takeaway. Again, it's a personal one, but I think our position is orbital debris needs to be addressed, and I know Ellzey is a very big advocate, and we've written many policy papers on that. But in terms of pushing anything specifically with Congress, I think there's enough people talking about it now. There's enough companies that are doing it, or providing ways to do it. Companies like Rogue Space, for example, that have a solution. But it's the legal framework that I would defer more to Michelle and her team on, that needs to be fleshed out. But more importantly, we need the economics. Who's going to get paid to take these things down out of orbit? And that's the missing link. If you can figure out who owns the old Russian rocket, or who has the rights to claim it, but someone's going to got to pay someone the money so that all these technologies that have just been developed can be used.
Very true. I see Larry has his hand raised, so I think I want to ask Larry to unmute and ask your question, Larry.
Yeah, it's simple. Has the policy committee come up with a list of space-related businesses out there? I found out in my experience with not only with Congress people, but local, state and local officials, if you can tell them that there's space industries in their community that bring jobs, the economy is a big selling point to get these people on your side.
Absolutely, Larry.
I mean, are you developing a list of these sort of companies, especially the new companies?
Yeah, we don't really have a list of them. I think there's many lists that have been created. I think most Congress people when I go to them, they already know not only which companies are in their district, they know how many people they employ. They've either been visited by them or they visited them, because that's first of all, they're usually pretty cool companies. And so they like to find out about them, but also because they want to know how many jobs that are involved, how much influence that company will have with them is based on how many jobs that company is creating. That's really how it's been. But in terms of a more general comment, I would think NSS we have a lot of good business contacts with particularly with the finance community, and probably with individual companies, but we don't do enough. I mean, obviously we've had enough interest from Blue Origin and Jeff Bezos that we've gotten a connection there, but what we don't have is a good rapport back and forth between specific individuals and what's going on in that company and our policies. And I mean, we do have a few outside of NSS, say within ASD, like on the board of ASD is Michael Mealing, who's a venture capitalist. We also have other people involved at Periphery that are involved in companies that are also on the board of NSS. But in terms of a good direct channel, that's something we need to work on, and certainly looking for ways that can be done. But I would say that is something that we need to do more of, is to integrate our policy with companies. Again, without advocating specific companies' contracts, but we need to know what these companies are doing and how that aligns with our vision.
I know in the last, I like to say this, in the last century, NSS used to try to work with companies to boost our impact. If we get the companies saying the same things about certain things, it doesn't always work, because if a company is doing something that's contrary to what we want, we have to leave them alone. But you can find you can find local people on, and then they can work on their own local politicians who will work on their congressmen. But we don't. The whole thing collapsed in the 80s and 90s because we didn't have the people to really push that hard.
Right.
We still don't.
I would say that the companies I'm most focused on are all the ones that are in the CLIPS list. I, for example, have tried to develop a relationship with a lot of NSS type people who work for Astrobotics. And I think we already have that. They've been in our conferences. But again, looking to go one step further to really be able to tout them as the embodiment of the vision of what we already say, that the CLIPS program is the embodiment of the best thing that NASA has to offer in our policy paper. But these companies embody that as well. And I think we need to find better ways to highlight them as the companies as a group and how they are really the key to opening up space.
Very good. Let me try to get to the last couple questions that have come in from the audience. And we have another question from Jeffrey. How difficult will it be to get regulators to tolerate risks and death in commercial space activities? I recall reading about 18% of those who went west in covered wagons never survived the trek. Can people be allowed to undertake the risk?
That's a good question. Certainly, I don't think I have an answer to that one specifically. I certainly, every time I hear about the fact that this project cannot fail, I think about all the businesses that fail and say, what human life is different, but even insurance companies put value on human life. So it certainly it's quantifiable. Question is how do we balance out the risk versus of people taking risk with their life versus the return. We say that everyone has a right to take a risk, but I guess it's only to a certain point. If it's surely going to kill them, they don't normally have that right. So I think we're so afraid of risk in our current society. I think we're having a tough time with this question, because when we go out to space, we're going to a world of greater risk rather than less risk, and it's going to be a different world, a different universe.
I remember seeing Neil Armstrong talking once at one of the anniversaries of Apollo 11, and he said that he felt, based on everything he knew, there was a 50% chance that they would land successfully on the moon, but he also felt that there was a 90% chance that he would make it back safely. So that still meant 10% that he wouldn't. That's would we all do that if we got on an aircraft, right? An airplane.
Right.
So let me get the last question, Randy.
Sure.
And let's see. Does NSS, this is from Bill, does NSS have any communication with or position papers relating to ARRL, the American Radio Relay League, AMSAT, the Amateur Satellite Corporation, and other amateur ham radio groups involved with space? AMSAT and other international groups have a number of satellites, and they're planning an amateur radio setup at the Lunar Gateway. Interesting question.
That is wonderful. I did not know that, but I was involved with when I was in Philadelphia chapter of NSS in the 80s with someone who was a key player in AMSAT. So I had some experience with this, and with how I was really amazed back then, even how much AMSAT was able to do independent as independent entity in space. So I certainly am open to talking about those kind of ideas. But again, this is a good example where the gateway is a good focal point. And I think that will be a focal point for a lot of different things, both individuals as well as countries. And so I think this is just one more example where the Lunar Gateway is a really important piece of the puzzle for our cislunar economy.
Let's see.
So thanks for that information.
Yeah, that's great. I want to see if one more question. It looks like one more question might have popped in. We've got a couple more minutes left. So let me see. Oh, okay. There is a permanent amateur radio setup installed on the ISS, is what Bill is saying.
Thanks again.
Yep. Very good.
Cool.
So very good. That there were quite a few questions that you answered. So I think Randy, you gave us some good insight into the operation of the policy committee and some of the key questions that people had about how we make policy and how NSS takes position and what our position is on certain aspects of space policy. So I found it really interesting and fascinating. So I really want to thank you, and I know Charles had to leave, but for taking the time to give us this added insight into a very important committee. So we really appreciate you taking the time to do that. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I'd like to thank our NSS President, Michelle Hanlon, for being here and providing the welcome and also adding some additional perspective. So Michelle, anything final to say before we close out? Nope.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Law school professor, all I do is teach on Zoom. Send us all of your ideas. The person who asked, is what are we thinking as our policy issues? What are you thinking is an issue? And it can be everything from our tourists, space tourists, astronauts. Should they be rescued? All these little questions, things about astronomy and satellite constellations. Anything that's on your mind, just shoot us an email and we can suss out if there's a policy paper in there. Thank you.
Yes.
Very
Thank you.
good. Thanks, Michelle. And again, I also want to thank Larry Ahern, my colleague and Vice President of Chapters, for all his help and again, getting these set up. And of course, our tech expert, Fred Becker, who takes care of the invites and also manages the process as we go through the town hall and space forum. So it wouldn't work without you. I did want to add a couple things about the chat again. Some people were talking about there's no save chat button, but if you see the 3 dots at the bottom, just hit the 3 dots and you'll see a save chat. So just in case people can't do it, but we're trying to save it and we'll add into all the links. I'll send those out in an email once we have the recording posted. So that way no one will miss anything. So again, I really want to thank everybody for participating. I do want to close out with sharing my screen one more time. Oh, okay, so Jeffrey's saying there aren't any 3 dots on his.
Yep.
Okay, well, I have saved the chat, so hopefully I'll be able to convey that to everybody. And I do apologize for the issues with chat. We're going to check into that. And I did see a message about possibly using Discord. I've heard of it, but I've never used it before. So we can look into all those possibilities as we move forward to other activities. So let me close out and share my screen one more time. And again, thank everybody for thank Randy and Charles for being part of our town hall today and all the work they are doing on the NSS Policy Committee, including all the other members they've mentioned that are part of the policy committee. So, oops, that went backward there. There we go. So for everybody, I want to thank you for attending tonight. If you're in the local time zones, have a great evening. I know we get a number of people who are in different time zones, so it's probably early, so have a great day. And as you're going into Friday, and of course, have a great weekend and stay safe out there. We really appreciate all you do and all your support for the National Space Society. So thanks, everybody. I'm just going to say, wishing everyone a good evening and take care, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Bert.